Hey everybody, how are you? It's Facebook Live Day. It's Hillary from the Cookie Countess, and I'm going to talk about different consistencies of royal icing today, how to achieve them, what works for me. I want to hear what works for you too, and we'll let some more people join before we really get going. But I've got John, the Count, with me, and I want to say hi. He's going to hold the camera while I work and read any questions you guys have. So please feel free to comment, ask questions, give your input. Hello, tell us where you're watching from if you want to. We'd love to hear. And if you're watching this on repeat, just know you can still ask questions, make comments. We can go back and answer them later, but if you don't get an answer right away, it means you're probably not watching live, so just know that. And so I'm going to give the camera over to John, and we will get started. Hold on, I'm going to turn this around. All right, there we go. Let's see, okay. Okay. So I prepared a lot of pink icing for everybody. Can you see okay? Yeah? Okay. So when I asked yesterday about what you guys would like to see on Facebook Live, it seemed like a lot of the questions were in regards to icing consistencies. And I definitely remember when I first started making cookies, gosh, it was over 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now, that was definitely the hardest thing to get a handle on. And it really is the thing you have to get a handle on before you can, proceed with your cookie making and take on new techniques. And, it's all about having that great foundation that we use so often as a metaphor. So really, if you don't have your icing, spot on, everything else doesn't quite work out. So I'm going to show you some different consistencies of royal icing. I'm going to show you what I like to use. This may not be what you like to use, and that's totally fine. People need to use what they love. What works for you may not work for your neighbors, and that's fine. The icing recipe that I'm using is on our website. If you're looking to try a new recipe, thecookiecountess.com. And it's under recipes. You'll see there's a tab at the top if you want to give it a try. So this is a royal icing recipe made with meringue powder, not with egg whites. I always use meringue powder. I can talk more about what's in it if you want to, or you can just go take a look at the recipe. But the way that my recipe works is we start out with a really, really stiff consistency. So I wanted to kind of show you what that looked like. So the first tub I have to show you is what it looks like coming right out of the mixer when I make it. So this is pretty stiff. You can see there's no way you're gonna flood with this. This is for me. When I make my royal icing, this is what I'm getting when I come out of the mixer. It has, peaks. It's not gonna flatten out. We're going to talk about the different seconds of icing, and I'll explain what that means, but this basically has no second value, or it has like a few minutes to it. But this is also pretty similar to the consistency I would use for stenciling with royal icing, and I'll probably do that in another video this week, but I'm going to mention it now since we have this out to play with. So this is maybe sort of the consistency of toothpaste. Again, this is what mine looks like when it comes out of the mixer. Maybe this is not what yours looks like, but starting with a stiff icing, I do think has some advantages in that if you store this, it won't separate as quickly as it will if you've already added a lot of water. If you've tried to store icing in the fridge before or even just on the counter, you probably notice that it starts to separate over time. The stiffer the icing is, the less it will separate because there's less water involved. So you'll see if you look at my recipe, I like to add fresh lemon juice to mine. If you don't like that taste, you're gonna add just a little bit more water to that recipe. But this is a great starting point. I have actually added also a little bit of white. We like to use the Artisan Accents Snow White, so I have started with a little bit of white in this. because I did use real vanilla. So I prefer to use real vanilla, even though it might tint the icing just a little bit.
Someone wants to know if you can freeze it.
You can freeze your icing. I have to say I haven't done that. I know a lot of people do, so I can't really give you like my firsthand experience. But I definitely know a lot of people that say they freeze it, especially if you've made, you know, a bunch of tubs of different colors and you don't need to use all of it. You might freeze it and thaw it out later.
Our recipe's lemony, right?
Yeah, so with our recipe, we put in, I actually like to use a bit of artificial butter flavoring, believe it or not. I think it cuts a little bit of that sweetness and gives it a bit of a creamier taste. And I do add real vanilla, and I do like to add fresh lemon juice. And you will see, if you look at the recipe, I think it says 2 tablespoons, but in real life, I don't actually measure it. I usually use the juice of 1 large lemon or 2 small lemons. And again, if you're gonna omit the lemon, add a little bit more water in the beginning part when you're whisking your meringue powder. What was the question? Lemon, yes. So, but I do like the lemon. I think it's not overpowering, but it does cut a little bit of that sweetness, which is nice. So the next consistency I'm going to show you is what I consider to be piping consistency. So, and we're going to take the raw icing and add some water to it in a little bit. But so for me, this is my piping consistency. So you can see it definitely looks different than the white did. It doesn't really peak. You know, if you let this sit for a while, it will go flat, but it's not like a flood where it's just gonna fall flat right away. And this is something you might use to write with, to outline with if you prefer to outline and then flood.
How much butter flavoring goes into it?
On ours, what I like is about 1 teaspoon. It might depend on the brand. If you're using like a super emulsion or just a regular butter, so you might have to experiment with it. But I usually use 1 teaspoon per 2 pounds of confectioner sugar. So again, this is the piping consistency, and I have some in a piping bag to show you. So let me pull that out, and I'll pull out some parchment paper. And I'm using a number 2 tip on here. So you can see it, it holds the line really nice, but it's still fluid enough that it's not going to break. You know, if you wanted to write with this, you could. This maybe is not ideal for doing dots because you'll get that little peak that won't fall down, for example. But this would be great for, you know, doing detail work that you don't want to fall apart, or if you're writing, again, for piping outlines. You might want to check, you know, a way to check if your piping is good is you could take some of your icing and just put a little bit in the tip and use your finger to press it out and see what happens when it comes out. Basically, you want it to hold its shape and not just, you know, kind of fall down and flood down. That's when you know you have a good piping consistency. If it's too thick, you're probably going to end up having it break on you, you know, as you pull. So if it seems like it's breaking too much, it's probably a little bit too thick. Like if we had tried to pipe with our original consistency, that probably wouldn't have worked. You'd kill your hand trying to pipe it out. Now you might need something closer to this if you're piping, say, leaves, you know, from a leaf tip. But for what we're talking about today, this is a good consistency. Any other questions on this? Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to go back and use this again too. Oops. Hold on. And I don't really count the piping icing by seconds because it is, again, it's because it's so stiff, it doesn't, for me, I wouldn't call that it has a second value, if that makes sense. But the next one I'm going to show you is a 20-second icing, and that does, so I'm going to explain that next. And I made sure to label them because I got worried I would get nervous and forget what I was doing. All right, so the next one I'm going to show you is, I have it in a jar and I have it in a bottle here, is 20-second icing. So if you've probably heard this term a lot, people talk about counting the seconds of their icing, and I'm going to explain what that means. And Sugar Belle has some great blogs on her website if you want to check them out that explain more about the different consistencies and counting by seconds. And the 20-second icing is kind of an in-between icing. It's in between a pipe and a flood consistency. It's a little bit, I would say it's a little harder to work with. It might be a little harder to find the sweet spot of the icing. It's not as forgiving necessarily, but it is an icing that you can pipe and flood with. You can't necessarily write with it, but if you are piping and flooding, your bases on your cookies, you could definitely use this if you only want to use one consistency. So this is my 20-second icing, and I'm going to show you what that means. I'm going to grab a timer. And what it means is if we pull a knife through this, how many seconds does it take for the icing to kind of come back together and go flat again? So let's hope this, I did count these out. Now I've said before when people ask me that I don't generally count my icing, but I think it's only because I've gotten to a point where I know what I like to do. But if you're a beginner, this is a great way to kind of check yourself and make sure you're on the right track. So if I take a knife through here, we're going to count how many seconds. So what you're looking for is how long does it take for this line to disappear. So we'll see if this is going to make a liar out of me, or if if I did it right. So we're in 70, 18, 19. All right, so we're at 20, 21. All right, so we're right about there. If we give this like a tiny little shake, it all goes flat. So that's what we mean when we say how many seconds is your icing. You probably heard that like phrase flying around in cookie groups. That's what it means. It's how long does it take, when you pull a knife through for that line to disappear. So it's a good way of checking the consistency of your icing while you're mixing it and before you actually put it in a bottle or a bag. So let me show you what that looks like coming.
Would you use that consistency for stencils, someone wants to know?
No, that would be too thin. For me, I think that's too thin. I think for most people it is too thin. You're going to end up with more of a more smudging underneath your stencil. It'll have too much of a chance to kind of seep through, or for the design to not stay, what's the word?
This was the one that she said would be with stencils in the beginning of the video.
Piping, yeah. So here's my 20-second icing. So you can see I could still pipe with this. Let's see, and I've got a PME 2.5 tip in here. PMEs are great if you like a half size. So you can see it's a little bit thicker than this. If you look at the edges, you can see the edge, like the edge of where it starts and finishes isn't quite as crisp. But you definitely can pipe and flood. So see, now this has fallen flat, so I could definitely use this for piping. So just working on parchment paper is a great way to practice. Make some squares, see how you do on your corners. Remember not to drag your tip through your icing. Keep it above. So when you're flooding with this type of icing, this should eventually fall flat. You may or may not have to help it along. And what I mean by that is, like, you could give your cookie a little shake, maybe use like a little scribe tool to push it around to the corners if you need to. But again, it's holding its shape, it's not flying all over the place. And this was one consistency out of, one bottle or one bag, whatever you prefer to use.
Someone wants to know the easiest way to fill those bottles.
These are the Sugar Belle bottles, and these are really nice because they do have a wider mouth, which is awesome. So some of the plastic bottles out there have a much smaller mouth and are harder to get them in. The easiest way is to use either a measuring cup that has a spout, maybe using a bowl that has a spout. I've been using this one, or those flexible bowls, and then just pour it in from your bowl or your measuring cup.
We usually sell those bottles, but of course we ran.
We're out of stock right now. I do love them to death, though. I really like, and the Sugar Bell bottles are great because they're not terribly stiff. So if you do use them for piping, they're not going to hurt your hand. And they come in 2 different sizes too, which is nice. There's a 4 ounce and an 8 ounce. So yes, usually we carry these. We're out of stock right now, so we'll get more though. All right, and then the third consistency I'll talk about is a flood consistency. So this is going to be the loosest one, and again, in a little bit after I finish this, we're going to go back and take this original icing all the way to flood consistency, so you can kind of see what that looks like. Here, I'll point this out while we're sitting here. This has been sitting here for maybe about half an hour now, and you can see all the air bubbles that have risen. And I don't know if you noticed, but the piping one didn't have any air bubbles when we opened it. The 22nd one had a few big ones, not a lot. This one has a lot more. And what that's from is because, you know, we're adding more and more water to get to a flood consistency. And the more you mix, the more you're getting air in there. So it is a good idea to let your icing sit for a while before you go to use it, and let the air bubbles rise to the top and then pop them. That way they don't end up on your cookie.
Do you have a lot of waste or separation using the bottles?
I don't think so. No, probably no more than a bag, really. I have to say, I used to be a bag user, and just in the past year, I've gotten more used to using bottles, and I do like them because you can fit more. It's kind of hard to hold, for me, it's hard to hold a piping bag that's really full, but I can hold, you know, an 8 ounce bottle easier. So flood consistency, again, obviously is a lot more fluid than what we started with. So for me, this is what I like for a flood consistency. This is probably kind of similar to maybe a shampoo, conditioner, maybe real maple syrup. And again, if we pull our knife through, we're probably going to end up with about, I think about a 10-second. I forget what this was, but let's do it again. So pull our knife through.
Does weather affect the icing?
It can, yeah. If you live in a really humid environment, it definitely can affect how your icing dries. 10, 12. So we're at 12. We're pretty much there. Yeah, humidity definitely can affect it. It can affect how it dries. Using a dehumidifier can help you with that if you ice your cookies and then pop them in a dehumidifier for a little while. You might also try upping your meringue powder, or upping your, if you use cream of tartar in your icing, that might help stabilize it a little bit more.
Do you outline with bottles or just fill?
I do both. Depends. It depends on, sometimes it depends on the shape, or, you know, if you have a shape that has a lot of twists and turns, if you feel like it's really what you can do best. You know, if you're best working with a bottle, or if you're better working with a bag, you know, you have to experiment. You know, what works, like I said in the beginning, what works for me may not work for you. So I definitely encourage everybody to experiment a lot.
Do you still dip your cookies?
I do sometimes, yes, and maybe I'll do a video on that another day. But if you want a real crisp look, piping and flooding is the better way to do it. So this is a flood consistency in the bottle. So you can see there's a big difference as it comes out. It's it falls flat really quickly. Let's see, this is a number 3 tip. So you don't get those same crisp lines that you do with a piping consistency. So again, you wouldn't. This is really just used for flooding.
Do you use fresh powdered egg whites, or meringue powder to make icing?
Meringue powder. Meringue powder is going to give you the most stable icing. I think that with fresh egg whites, you definitely have to be careful because you don't want to end up, I don't know, you don't have to worry about the freshness of it when you're using meringue powder, if that makes sense.
What's the biggest difference between bags and bottles? Maybe like as far as performance goes. Bag hurts your hand more.
Well, I mean, it depends. Some people would say the bottle hurts their hand. Honestly, you have to just try both and see what you prefer. Like I said, I've done all of the above. I've also tried doing the thinner tipless bags, and it wasn't for me. So I like using tips. Some people threw away their tips as soon as they started using the tipless bags, and if that works for them, that's wonderful. So again, do what works for you.
Can you leave icing in the bottles for days?
You can. If it's like a flood consistency, you're probably going to end up with some separation. So you're going to have to get in there and mix it up. We do sell a bottle spatula from Sugar Bell, which you can use for that. You can also, you might end up dumping it out back into your mixer and remixing it. So, you know, the fresher, the better. If it's been sitting on your, counter for days and it starts to separate, you probably are going to have to take it out and mix it again.
You usually like keep the big bowl not in the fridge, right?
Yeah, I don't make as many cookies as a lot of you guys, but I will just leave the bowl out. But usually it's this consistency. It's not one that I've watered down, so you get very little separation. And if there is a little bit, I'll throw it back in the mixer. All right, so let's go to, I'm just going to rinse this spatula for a second, or what is this called? This is a spatula, right? Hang on. All right, how long have we been on? Is everybody bored yet, or no? You're okay?
20 minutes.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for hanging in. Wow, okay. So, like I said, this was icing that was straight from the mixer when I was done. So I'll show you the process for getting it to where you need it. So obviously this is a little too stiff. One thing I do recommend is if you're going to color your icing, so I'm going to use the same pink I've been using. This is the Artisan Accents Pinkalicious. Color it before you add your water because, especially if you need a dark color, the gel has a liquid value to it too. So you might want to color your icing before you start. So obviously it doesn't take much. We don't have a ton of icing here, so really all a drop is what you need. So you can see the consistency already has changed just a little bit.
From the time you mix it to the absolute time you have to throw it out, a couple weeks?
God, I hate answering that question because it just, I mean, if you're using fresh egg whites, definitely not a couple weeks. I think if you can put it in the fridge, it's going to help you, or put it in the freezer, but I would say try to use it within a week, really. But, check it and see does it smell different? Does it taste different, So one of the best tricks I learned early on in my cookie making was to use a spray bottle. One Tough Cookie wrote about this in a blog years ago, using a spray bottle to add water to your icing, and this is a great way to slowly add water. The worst thing is if you go over to the sink and you turn it on hoping that you're only going to get a little drizzle, and you pour like a half a cup of water in your icing. So again, it doesn't take much at all. So as you add water, you can check the consistency, give it a little shake, see how long it takes to go flat. So here we're probably at about piping consistency or stenciling consistency. So if we want to keep going.
Betty, it's on our website, thecookiecountess.com.
So the spray bottle really is nice. It gives you just, and again, it's just water in there. Just a little bit at a time, all you need. So again, if you wanted to do the, the knife trick, you could see where you are with counting. I think we might be at 25 seconds-ish, somewhere around there. So
Is Artisan Accents your favorite?
It is, yeah. It's a new company, and I have to say I really, really, really love their products. It's very consistent. It doesn't take much color at all.
They're in New Jersey, and they've been in the business a long time, and just kind of came out with this sub-brand, and they're great people. And
They are. They're super wonderful to work with. So, yeah, they have a parent company that's been providing color and flavors to major food suppliers for a long time, and then decided to make an artisanal for the home baker line, and we really do love it. They make great flavors too. So again, keep adding water, do your knife test until you get to where you need to be. And then, you know, if we wanted to fill our bottles, a bowl like this is nice because it has a spout. Do you guys want to see, I do have some naked cookies we could pipe with if you want to see. Does anybody want to see that, or are we getting bored with me?
Okay.
Do they want to see me pipe?
Of course I do.
Okay. All right. All right, let's do it. All right, come with me over here. All right, let me grab. So you know what I'll do? Why don't I do one cookie? I'll do what I just did a second ago with the 22nd and one with the pipe and flood. So let me set up over here. And if anybody needs pink icing after this, I have some extra. Okay, that's all I need. All right. Here, you come over here. So you're on this side of me. So actually, I'll show you, I did do some bunnies earlier, and I can show you the difference, and then I will pipe some myself. But, so for example, and this is something I get asked about a lot too, and you might be wondering about how do you either keep the line on the edge or get rid of the line on the edge. So this cookie, I used my piping consistency in the piping bag with a tip, and then I flooded with my flood consistency. With this one, I used my 22nd icing to pipe and flood. So you can see there's definitely a difference. I mean, the average person probably isn't really gonna see a difference, but there is a difference in how it looks, on this one you can see you don't see any outline. On this one you do, even though I flooded this right away. So if you don't like the look of the outline, you're going to want to use probably more of this or a looser piping, not quite so stiff. If you do like the look of the outline, let's say you're going to outline in pink and flood in white, you are going to want to use a stiffer icing, or at least let that pipe dry a bit before you go into your next color and let it set. That way.
How long do you let it dry between decorating?
Between baking and decorating, or between, is that the question?
I don't know, maybe just like how long are these going to dry before?
Well, let's see. I did these about an hour ago now. They're definitely still tacky, so these aren't ready to do much of anything with. If all I had to do was like pipe some eyeballs or a little bow, I could probably do it now, as long as I was careful not to bump into this. You know, if I press on this, it's gonna crack and you're gonna get a mark. These wouldn't be ready to stencil on yet, so you know, it's gonna depend again on your conditions. If it's humid where you are, this might take a little longer. You know, it's warm here today. I turned off the AC so I could talk without the AC over me. If I had the AC cranked up, these might dry faster. You can also put your cookies in front of a fan, which helps them dry quicker, or put them in a dehumidifier. I mean, a dehydrator.
You usually do the seamless ones, right?
I do. I personally prefer that look, but again, that's me. That may not be what you like.
Do you tend to use border when flooding with 22nd?
Do I use a border?
Yeah.
I still make a border, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll do that right now. So I've got, hang on 1 second.
Is the chocolate recipe on the website? I think
It is, yep. The chocolate ones are yummy. They taste a lot like brownies. All right, so make sure everything's the way I like it. All right, so this is my piping consistency. let's hope I can do this. I'm a little nervous. So this is a pretty ornate cutter, so I'm going to go slow. And again, don't drag your tip through the icing. You want to come a little closer to the surface when you're making a turn, or if you want to stop, you're going to press your tip down. But if you're not stopping, you don't need to bring your tip down to the bottom. This is the new Lila Loa cutter too that we sell. I love this plaque.
That's a big cookie.
It is a big cookie, yes. This is about a 4-inch, I think 4.5 inches. And then if you want to get rid of like these little tips, use a scribe tool, use a toothpick, something like that. So if I go back in right now, I can flood immediately. It probably won't get rid of that line completely. So this is the flood consistency that I showed you earlier. So make sure I get no air bubbles. I like to work from the outside in, and I usually flood with a number 3 tip. You don't want to go too much bigger because then you'll put a lot more icing down on your cookie, and you will run the risk of it running over the edge. So I usually stay a little bit away from the edge of the icing if it's a big cookie. Those little pops you hear are the air bubbles popping.
I think this process is like one that people just can't look away.
What do you mean?
Like as soon as you start doing that, like the viewers go up.
Oh yeah. Maybe I should just sit and flood cookies all day. So this is pretty flat. You've probably seen me. Sometimes I'll give it like a little shake. When you do pipe it all the way to the edge like this, you want to be careful about picking it up and moving it. That's usually when you end up bashing the edge in.
So why didn't this one go seamless?
Because the consistency of the icing in the piping bag is a lot stiffer and it doesn't necessarily melt, for lack of a better term, into the flood icing.
And
so over time it may disappear a little bit more. You could try to play with it a little bit if it was really bothering you, but I'm not going to mess with this anymore because it looks pretty good. But you'll see the difference when I use the 20 seconds. So let me move this out of the way. And if you have any air bubbles, I can see a couple, you can go in and pop them with your scribe tool. Or, I mean, honestly, we're getting really picky now, so no one else is going to notice that. Especially when you put some fabulous decorations on top, like some stencils. Alright, so here's my 20-second icing.
so much for 20 minutes.
Alright, this is the last thing, I swear. But then we'll compare. So I think you'll notice right away it's not gonna, won't be able to quite hug the corners as tightly because it's a little bit looser. So I'm actually probably gonna stay in just a little bit from the edge. So that way when I flood, it might push it out a little bit, and then I just want to make sure I don't run the risk of overflowing. When you have a bigger cookie, you do have more risk of overflowing the cookie.
Now, do you have more control with that, with the piping bag than the bottle?
No, it doesn't. It's more the consistency. It's more you. Can you handle the bag better or the bottle, you know?
Veronica, you can watch it from the beginning, right?
Yes, so this video will stay in the feed under, if you like go back to my Facebook page, just click on videos, and there's actually a section, I just realized earlier today, for live videos. So they all will hang out together, and you can go back and watch this. Yeah, if you're only just joining us now, it will stay in the feed. So again, this is the 20-second icing. You can see as I flood it, it's not falling flat as quickly as the flood icing did.
That's a 3-inch tip, right?
3. They're not inches. This is actually a PME 2.5. I think I said 3, but I was mistaken. So this is a 2.5. And you know, if we need to help this settle down, we can give it a little shake. Probably if I just let this alone, it would go flat in a minute anyway. So, and if, you know, if you want this to come to the edge, you can play with these a little bit. You know, like I said, I didn't pipe right to the edge because it is a large cookie and I didn't want it to go over. But you can see there's a difference between the look of this first one and this one. Can you show them?
Somebody says 20-second looks great and quicker.
Yeah, so so you can see this piping edge has, you know, just about disappeared, not all the way, but probably the outline of the shape is a little bit crisper. I mean, if we're really getting picky, we're not, you know, let's be honest. Any of these are great.
I think the second one looks better.
Do you?
Yeah.
So it might be a personal preference thing too, you know, but and it might depend on your workflow. If it's easier for you to outline all your cookies at once and then go back and flood them in a step 2, do it that way. If this is faster for you to do it all out of one bottle. I mean, do you remember when I used to make a lot of cookies and you would help me actually, and I would pipe all the cookies and then I would give them to John and hand him a bottle and he would flood them for me because that doesn't take so much skill. So, you know, it might depend on, you know, if you have a bakery, it might be easier to have someone really skilled pipe and someone who's just learning flood. But there is a difference in the look, but again, it's personal preference.
Yes, Mona, we do. It's under the cutters. That's the
oh, the plaque. Yeah, this is the Lila Loa
plaque.
So, so that's it. I hope that helped. That was everything I kind of wanted to cover today. If you guys have any more questions, you can feel free to make comments underneath the video. Again, it will stay in the feed. Any other questions before I go?
Chocolate cookie recipe is on our website.
So is the royal icing recipe.
I have a question. If you dipped that last one, do you think you could get it to be as good as these?
The difference that you'll see is, and again, the average person's probably not going to see any difference, but it's going to grab the edges of the cookie in a way that doesn't look as clean as piping it. So like from the top view, it probably doesn't look any different. From the side view, and again, I'm getting really, really picky here, you're going to see a little bit of just, especially if you do it on chocolate with a light icing, a little bit of jaggedness almost. I don't know how to explain it. But the top will be flat. It'll be great to work with, and it is. It can be faster, you know, to dip them. So maybe I'll do that in a different video, and then we can go back and I'll keep these and we can look at those and see the difference.
Someone asked how you get them the same thickness. Well, Lynn, we're coming out with a new product that is going to answer that on how we do it.
Yeah, stay tuned. So another few weeks.
Hopefully a couple of weeks we'll be launching it. Best thickness would be
These are 1/4 inch. If you want them a little bit thicker, we'll have an option to do thicker too. I think that most people do a 1/4 inch.
We did a poll and 75% of the people did 1/4 inch and 25% did 3/8. What's he gonna recommend? Do you dip with the 20-second?
I would dip probably with somewhere in between 20 and flood. I've never actually counted it, okay. So we'll have to do it and we'll count it. So it seems like there's a lot of dipping questions, so maybe we'll do that later in the week. So, any other questions before I go? I hope this helped.
How long do you let them dry before you stencil?
Generally, I would just let them dry overnight. If you don't have a dehumidifier to put them in, or, I mean, if you put them in front of a fan, they might be ready in a couple hours. Maybe for airbrushing, but maybe still not for stenciling with royal icing because you're going to put more pressure on the top. So if you can, you know, maybe bake and flood your cookies in one day, and then the second day, you know, do your airbrushing and piping your details and all that stuff. So that way, you know, you're sure that everything's dry.
We're working on it, Suzanne.
Anything else?
Have you ever piped then dipped? That doesn't work. Right?
No.
Yeah, the bands are no good. So Lynn, if you do a lot of cookies, our product is going to help you. Let's see what else.
All right.
That's
I
it.
feel like I should be doing a song and dance over here now. You're just... All right. Well, thank you for watching. If you have more questions, you can leave them at the bottom. I'll go back later today and take a look at the questions. And again, this will stay in the feed. And the recipe I like to use is on our website, thecookiecountess.com. But again, this all kind of applies to whatever recipe you might use, whatever royal icing recipe. You know, I encourage everybody to experiment and try what works best for them. Is there another question?
What meringue powder?
Oh, right now I've been using either CK or the Dream Powder from Creative Cookier. Really like that one. It's a little more expensive, but it's wonderful to work with. Anything else? No?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll let you know what I'm going to do tomorrow.